Welcome to the Great Shrimp Shoal. Today we're going to cover the 10-gallon tank containing the forest and something that has managed to concern me greatly that I found during maintenance. My very first shrimp has gone missing, and I need to get to the bottom of the mystery. As always, please like and subscribe, and welcome to the show. Let's get things started. I had to take a pause from my work on the new Sea Clear tank to update you on the state of the forest. As I had said in my last video, letting the rotala grow unchecked has led to a slight problem. Trimming the plant does not slow its growth enough at all anymore, and it can hide sick or dead shrimp, so that I can't get to help them in time. Lo and behold, when I started trimming the forest this morning, I noticed that something wasn't quite right. The sole member of this tank that stood out from the green and brown background was nowhere to be found. Yes, my very first shrimp, my cherry shrimp Matriarch, had vanished seemingly overnight. When I had started trimming, I was very careful, and going this slowly is somewhat painful and tiresome. But as the plant started to thin out, I became more worried. I wasn't seeing the telltale red flash that let me know that my red cherry shrimp was moving around the tank. I quickened up my cleaning and drained some water from the tank as well. Then I began to look around in every crevice, behind and under every plant, and even inside the cholla wood that had some small places to hide in. Nothing. No carapace, no legs or shell to speak of, no red pieces anywhere in the tank. Then I frantically checked the bucket to see if I had accidentally sucked up the remains or the live shrimp without noticing. This was unlikely because I had been looking out even for baby shrimp, and she wasn't in the bucket when I checked. How does a 1.5-inch red shrimp go missing from a tank overnight? I've had ghost shrimp almost leap out of a bowl before, so I know that when they need to, these dwarf shrimp can really move. But this old gal was slower moving and unlikely to have jumped out of the tank. I checked and rechecked everywhere and then started to clean up some of the algae and filter components. I let the water settle for a bit and then stared at the tank for a while to see if I could notice any small changes in color along the bottom of the tank. Nothing. So it would seem that she really is missing. Presumably very much dead, and she will be missed sorely. She was the first and largest shrimp that I had when I started the garden, and she weathered all of my misfires and mistakes over the past year. But these can't live forever, and she was nearing the final days of her comfort. As I said in a recent overview of shrimp growth, they molt less and less over time, so they eventually become less able to regenerate their carapace, and that leads to a greater chance of decay and disease. She likely was eaten by the snails and the ghost shrimp. I was looking to rehouse the residents of the forest soon, and this may be the kick that I needed to actually get the job done and to do it right. The rotala has now made maintaining this tank very difficult because it has now grown to cover nearly every inch of the substrate. It does put down small roots at first, just strings really. Eventually, though, the smaller hairs start to grow, and these are essential for the plant's nutrients collection. And once this happens, the rotala's grasp in the soil is strengthened considerably. Trimming the shoots and leaves only does a little bit to stop its growth because where you cut one, 2 or more shoots sometimes pop up. The best way to control this plant is to trim the vertical growth, especially trimming the roots when you find them and doing it frequently. Once that is taken care of, the runners have to be trimmed and removed completely because simply separating them from the main plant will not stop their growth, as they become self-sufficient very quickly when they grow their roots. When I started growing this set of plants, I did so from a culture, and some of the pieces I stuffed into the ground were nothing more than shreds of stems. They all managed to take hold though, and every plant in my tank has come from that single culture. Long story short, rotala grows enough for 3 or 4 plants, even more vigorously than the hygrophila that I was initially worried about in the garden. And boy did I mismatch what these would do. 10 months later, and it's the rotala that I'm worried about, and the hygrophila has barely moved an inch. It just grows up and maintains one single plant. There are some offshoots, but it is a very well-contained plant overall, especially when compared to the other plants that I grow. As far as the shrimp are concerned, they don't seem to mind. It could be this plant or another. They like all of them equally, and to be perfectly honest, they like that almond leaf, which is dead, just as much. I haven't figured out what I'm going to do about the cherry shrimp matriarch. She was an important member of the forest, but her passing may signal that the time is right to move on. I may need to rethink the forest design a little bit, as it would probably be better with a lot more substrate and a few large pieces of wood to offset the plants just a little bit. Even with 1/3 as many plants, the 30-gallon tank that contains the mountains looks wonderful and lively. The mountains are proof that you don't always need a lot of plants to make your planted tank shine. Although I may be getting ahead of myself, when I created and planted the scaping for the mountains, I used almost the same number of plants and similar varieties as I used in the forest. It just comes down to keeping them trimmed and taking care of them, and I suppose the amount of space that they have to grow in. It's always been easier keeping and caring for the mountains. Despite all this, the forest is still doing all right. The jade green cherry shrimp are reproducing, but I would like to see better numbers with their community as well. I just started keeping them on the new feed and made sure that their water hardness is matching the levels that I've been keeping in the 30-gallon tank. Now, with all the plants trimmed, hopefully they'll rebound, as there is just one female who carries eggs at the moment, at least as far as I can tell. Also in the forest, which I have to keep reminding myself is just a 10-gallon tank, I've noticed a ton of new worms, which is slightly worrisome. They are much smaller than the rhabdicola, and when a detritus worm gets close enough, they look positively microscopic. Their size might actually mean that they are some other smaller freshwater creature that could end up being of no concern. I don't really know if they started from scratch, hitched a ride in on a shrimp or a plant, or if they're just smaller versions of something that has already found a foothold in the tank. Here are all 3 varieties of what I assume are all worms right next to each other. You can see here that the detritus worm is by far the largest. I have seen them swimming freely in the tank when I clean the filter, but these that I see along the edge under the substrate are at least 5 times the size of the ones I see anywhere else. They clean the gunk and the mulm that falls onto the substrate, so they are very helpful roundworms, but after getting a look at them up close, I can't help but wonder what else they might eat. Whenever they get close to the other smaller creatures in the tank, I always keep an eye on them to see if they'll take a bite out of something that moves. Nothing yet though. For now, they seem like nothing more than vegetarians. Or maybe they just dirt eaters. The size of the new pseudoworms has me thinking that they're something else entirely. Their actions and their speed compared to their size makes me think that they are Daphnia, which are the precursor to copepods. So having all of those back in the tank would be a good thing, especially when it comes to keeping the algae at bay. The ghost shrimp are doing all right in the forest, but I can't help but think, given their success versus the success of keeping the Neocaridina, that it may not actually be worth keeping them in the tank for long periods of time. I'm seriously rethinking whether I will restock when the last of them die off. They eat, molt, and do fine in the same water, but they'll never be able to breed or propagate in the setup that I have here. There's just no use for it because they are so plentiful in the wild. Elsewhere in the shoal, in the 30-gallon tank, things are going swimmingly. No pun intended. I've switched over to the new feed and slowly the shrimp have taken to it. Unfortunately, it took one of the bamboo shrimp getting right up in the feeding dish and spreading it all over the tank before the snowball shrimp started to take it seriously. The bamboo shrimp was basically kicking up the food, and after it was dissolved into flakes, and then it would shuffle crumbs into its mouth using its maxillipeds. The effect was like throwing a bowl of cereal at your face just to get a few pieces into your mouth. It was fun to watch though. It really shows that the bamboo shrimp have a few options when it comes to feeding themselves, and this is how they approach larger meals. Also in the 30-gallon tank containing the mountains, today I woke up to the snowball shrimp quickly swimming around the tank, keeping close to the walls and moving from one side to the other over and over again. Usually they stay close to the bottom and rummage around on every surface, but whenever they swim frantically like this, I've come to suspect a particular scenario. You see, when the female is ready to breed, she releases pheromones into the water and usually stays still while the males swim around searching for her. I actually caught a pair in the process this morning but wasn't able to get to my camera in time. Hopefully one of the other females will soon fertilize as well and I'll be able to get it on camera. It is an interesting process, to be honest. At first, I thought for a second one of the two shrimps were dead, but they eventually finished and then both went their separate ways. Again, this process has a lot in common with how birds mate, except with some obvious differences. That's it for today's episode. Thank you guys for showing up and seeing what's going on in the 10 and the 30-gallon tanks. I am sad to have lost the red cherry shrimp that I've had the longest, but these things do happen and they can't live forever. I guess the weirdest part is the fact that there is no sign that she was ever there in the first place, and with every other shrimp that's died in any of the tanks that I've kept, there's been something left behind, even if the other shrimp had begun to eat. I also have something amazing coming up as I've ramped up my work on the System 2 tank with the included sump, but I have made a grievous mistake. In my excitement, I mismeasured or miscalculated, and when I recorded my commentary for that initial episode, I mistook it for a 120-gallon tank, when it was in fact just 75 gallons. I don't know what happened. To be honest, when I saw the listing, it was listed at 75 gallons, especially when I went back and looked at everything. Still, 75 gallons is nothing to sneeze at, and the rehabilitation of that tank is really coming along nicely. It's something to behold. So we'll have that to look forward to in the next episode. Until then, I hope that you guys have some sweet shrimpy dreams, and I'll see you guys next time on The Great Shrimp Shoal. Good night.